Let's go ahead.
Well, we want to thank all of you for coming on to the show World's Finest True Believers. And the reason all of you are here, Kyle, Ryan, and Matt, is you're here to promote your big new project, SuperMassive, as they say on the image solicit, spinning out of 2021's hottest new superhero debut, Radiant Black, launches into the first crossover event with Image Comics' debut of Inferno Girl Red and the first appearance of Rogue Sun. So, and they say the future of Image superheroes universe is here. So, Clay and I have been big fans since issue 1. We've been big fans of all your work since when we ever discovered them. So this is a fun opportunity for us.
Oh, awesome. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, likewise. This is great.
So first question of World's Finest that we ask new guests is, for each of you, what was the comic book or graphic novel that either hooked you and inspired you to be a writer, and what creators influenced you?
Wow. So I guess I would probably cite, honestly, the Nightwing series that's over my shoulder. Was the first ongoing series that I actually started collecting. Spider-Man I was reading before that, and some Daredevil, and X-Men. But this was the era where like a crossover, part 1 would be in one title and part 2 would be in another title and part 3 would be in another title. And I'm buying comics at the grocery store, so sometimes I would miss things. It was whatever was there. But Nightwing, the number was so low, it was like issue 16. And I was like, oh, I could find those earlier issues. And then he became my favorite character. And so meeting Chuck Dixon and talking to Scott McDaniel over like message boards and stuff, it was where I was like, oh, okay, so this is how they, and then reading Wizard. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, this is how they make comics, or at least that's the perception of how they make comics. Was really like, that was a kind of a game changer for me a little bit. So.
Yeah, for me, I think I remember vividly buying the trade of Death in the Family, just with the black cover with him holding Robin. And I was like, Robin's dead. I want that one. So I remember getting that and then like wearing that out. I actually still have that somewhere, but it's like a tattered mess because I've read it so many freaking times. But that was the first. That's like the first comic book I remember when I remember reading that, and then going to like the library and finding The Dark Knight Returns, and then have to have my mom see me reading a thing with a Nazi with like a Nazi symbols over her breasts, and like, so that got Batman taken away for a little while. But it was like that stuff. But Image was the reason I went into to comic. I mean, it really is. When I was 13, that's when Image started. So I bought every single book and loved all those books, and was like, that was when I started. I was in love with the artists, and like that's what I wanted to do. So I went to art school for all that stuff, and then somehow through like the weird cacophony of events, ended up writing comic books. So yeah, it was like a weird transitional stuff. But yeah, I would say Image is probably the biggest motivation for me.
So I've been on the podcast before, and I've answered this question before, and I suspect what I mentioned for sort of one of the big things that brought me into comics was. The first time I ever went to like something of a dedicated comic store was actually like a hybrid record and comic store. I went in there because I'd like picked up a handful of things on newsstands, but in Australia, comics are so sporadic. Getting single issues is basically impossible. So the first sort of like real like whole story experience I had, I went in and I saw a Justice League trade. I was like, well, that's good value because I can afford one, and that has so many. Like, I'm going to get some Batman, I'm going to get some Superman, I'm going to get some Wonder Woman. Great. So I opened it up, and like those guys were there for sure. Great. Love to see those people that I have a lot of affection for. But then also there's Zoriel and Mr. Miracle and Plastic Man. And the Justice League was like 12 to 24 members strong at that point. And I remember having this intense feeling of like, wait, who are all these people? And like, do they all have their own worlds and like their own deals? And like my mind exploded, extrapolating this universe from all of these different people. I was like, well, if Batman has like all of the stuff I know that Batman has going on, like what's with this literal angel from heaven? There's probably something going on there, right? And I think I'm kind of only just connecting the dots now, but I do feel like there's something of that I wanted to bring a little bit to Supermassive is like these are three like very whole, well-realized characters, and two of which you're going to be meeting for the first time. And we want to try and give people this sense of like, you'll get a whole complete story here, but hopefully give you this sense of wonder over what's over the horizon and the fully formed worlds that come from all of these characters. And I think even with Radiant Black, you're going to get a sense of more of the world that's coming. So you'll hopefully come away with a similar sense of excitement and wonder.
Now, I will admit, Michael, we were not expecting you to be here, so
Yes,
I feel
I know,
bad for
That's
not
right. Yeah,
having
I
your
am-
name
I am
in
also
our
here.
notes and everything
Yes.
else. So, Michael, real quick, just introduce yourself
Yeah.
to the podcast and then answer the same question.
Sure. I'm Michael Busuttil. I'm the editor / designer on Radiant Black and Rogue Sun, and I am
He's here to
helping
make
out
sure
on
that
Inferno
we do
Girl
not
Red.
tell anything that we're not supposed to tell.
I cannot stop these people from saying anything. I think past podcasts have proven. I think for me, it's hard for me to get the timeline straight. I feel like it was Ultimate X-Men that I was sort of like an anime kid, although that was much harder in Australia 20 years ago than it is now. And I was at a convention and they were like, it's the X-Men, but we started again. And I was like, sick. I've seen the cartoon. I know what the X-Men is. There'd been, I don't know, 2 or 3 movies at that point. Like everyone knows the X-Men, but this is number one. And I was like, great. I'm going to buy the first one. I bought volume 1 and 3 because they didn't have volume 2. And I was like, excellent. This is the X-Men. And that book is wild, right? Like it's very much of its time and very specific, but also it's the X-Men, but they started again. And that was perfect for me at that point. And then very shortly after that, within a week, I read Steven Seagal and Teddy Christensen's It's a Bird, which is a book about using the metaphor of Superman to discuss a Huntington's diagnosis, and Neil Gaiman's Mr. Punch with Dave McKean, which is about like the validity of memory and what childhood is like as an adult. And in that week, I was like, oh shit, well, okay, I guess they can be bigger than just this guy with laser eyes, huh? That's neat. Cool. And then, I mean, once you've read those 3 books, it's like, that's comics. What more do you need?
It's funny you mentioned It's a Bird. We've actually covered that on this show, and that was a really fascinating book.
Yeah. I mean, like, I haven't gone back to reread it in a long time. I think because I'm worried about, like, it is so weirdly formative to me, and no one talks about it because it was like this weird Vertigo book from 15 years ago, and I kind of don't want to, but I think at some point my trade is on the bookshelf behind me. I might just go back and give it a read again.
Very nice. Now, this question is for Kyle. Where'd it go? For those who have not read Radiant Black, by the time this episode is coming out, of course, Supermassive is just about to release. So can you give us a brief cliff notes of where the story of Radiant Black is currently? Of course, without the excessive spoilers, since we are doing this, 2 months before, or a month before, sorry.
Well, the good news is that he's exactly where we last publicly saw him. Cool. Which was issue 11. So that issue is already out. And so basically that's kind of the end of year 1. I mean, issue 12 is the actual end of our year 1 publishing, but it's a look at Radiant Pink and an origin of her, much like our issue 6 origin of Radiant Red. So where the status quo is now, I mean, do you want like context for what the series is about?
Yeah, just like a brief, like what the origin was, what the characters went through.
So
and then
basically, the way I describe the book is that I describe it as Power Rangers for adults, and then I always want to qualify that though, which is that it's not to say Power Rangers isn't for adults, but what it really means is that Power Rangers with adult problems. So it follows a 30-year-old writer named Nathan Burnett, who is from Illinois and is now living in Los Angeles and trying to be the next great like crime novelist. Raymond Chandler is his hero. And when we meet him, shit ain't working out. And so he's $38,000 in credit card debt, and the bank is turning him down for a loan. And it turns out he's an Uber driver, or driver, DRIVR is our rideshare service in said universe. I believe that was a Matt name actually as well. So, and then, so he moves back in with his parents, and he and his high school best friend find a miniature black hole after a night of drinking and bemoaning compounding interest rates. And that's when he transforms and becomes a helmeted hero, loose term hero. And everything kind of breaks down from there. So, we well, I'm just gonna say it, kill him, and the best friend takes over, and he is not qualified for the job. So where we're meeting him now in Supermassive is that he has managed to actually bring his friend Nathan back from his comatose post-death state. And he was only dead for, a few minutes. They were to revive him, but he was in a coma, etc. And now Marshall's looking to figure out what the future of Radiant Black looks like. And that's when Inferno Girl Red comes crashing into our universe.
Causing some trouble. Yeah.
So, there we are. So for those of you who haven't picked it up, you've got a cliff notes, but definitely you got to pick up some issues. Do all the homework. That's
Find our Blacklight issue 10. It's worth it.
Oh, yes.
Still looking for it.
Next question is just basically for all of you is, how did the creation of Supermassive kind of come to be? Like, we all know you plan things out, you plan with the quote unquote end in sight, but how did this all kind of come about, especially with all you having different points of view, wanting to bring in new characters? Like, kind of talk us through what's happened.
We were poking and prodding Matt last time he was here, like, hey, is there something going on? We know you guys talk. So what was the pitch, and how did it all go?
I think Michael, you can take this one this time.
Yeah,
I like that we switch off.
I feel like at some point, Kyle, we had Radiant Black was about to come out, or like we were in the home stretch early on. Ryan was talking about Rogue Sun, weren't sure when exactly it was going to launch, how ready we were going to be. Matt was gearing up to do the Kickstarter. And I think Kyle was just sent a message that was like, hey, what if they all met? What if we just did a crossover?
And we built to it.
Yeah, and because we're early on in Radiant Black, so we could build up to that. Nothing else is out yet, so we can prepare for it as we go, and we can work out how it's going to work. We all jumped on a Zoom. I was in my car in a car park, and we had a really first conversation that was like, so let's just talk hypothetically. Could we do this? Like, would this work? What would the very basics of it be? And I think at the end of it, we were all like, okay, so now the problem is that we now have to do this, because it would be great to get to do
especially
this.
Because Michael then realized a week later that February is the 30th anniversary of Image Comics. And that's also the month that is the 1 year point of Radiant Black. And so it's like, well, there's our window. That's our month to build to. And there's enough time to do it.
So now it's clear it was your fault. Okay, now I see.
The truth comes out.
Yeah. And so then, from there, it was just working out where it would fall in the publishing timeline and the story timelines of everyone's books. And then just writing it like it was easy. It was smooth. We broke the script over a couple of Zoom calls. We worked out what the big story of it would be. We divided it up basically just into 3 chunks and let everyone take a first pass at it. And then everyone went back over it, especially looking at their characters and making sure that those made sense and tracked, but also just offering feedback on anything else. And then it was more or less done at that point, right? It was surprisingly simple for something that I thought would be a lot more complicated.
I think we've spent more time on these interviews together on Zooms than we did in putting things together, because everyone was firing on all cylinders, and we have such a track record working together. Not all three of us together, four of us, like we hadn't done that before. Although actually we did very briefly. There was that moment after Shattered Grid when we were working on a thing for a second.
That's true.
And that was really smooth as well. And so when this came time to build something cool, we were all looking for like the coolest way to do it. And so that just makes it fun.
Yeah, everyone here knows each other really well, has worked together in different permutations and combinations, knows what they like and what their stories are and what they want those stories to be. And so there was no like, oh, well, do we do this? It was very much someone would say something and everyone would either go yes or no, that doesn't work for me. And here's why. What if we did this instead? And then all of a sudden you've got Supermassive. I think we spent more time trying to work out what it would be called than trying to work out what it was going to be.
Now, do you have drafts of like real, like just dumb names that you were just like, hell no, like this can't work out?
Yeah, there's some in my messages from some of these people where they were like, what if we called it this? And then having to be like, no, we can't. That sounds like a sex thing. We can't call it that. It was the Image 30th anniversary. We were like, can you put 3 X's in? But unfortunately, that's a whole other thing.
And then there were some good names. I think we did have a name we really liked, but it wasn't available because it was being used for something else at Image.
Okay.
Yeah, and a couple of other names that didn't work for other various reasons.
Yeah.
And then yes, a couple of names that were dumb suggestions that we probably shouldn't have spent as much time considering as we did.
I think I found out the name like a week after it was approved. Like I was like, it was in an email.
You were on the email, right?
Oh, that doesn't mean it was written that I read it. But I just remember it came up and you were like, hey, Supermassive. I was like, what is Supermassive? Like, it's the crossover. I was like, oh, okay, cool.
I think that as much as it took a long time to get to the name, it certainly helped me understand kind of what we're trying to do. So I think in a lot of ways, like Radiant Black has been running for a year and has really like set the tone of the books are different, but the ambition I think has been set by Radiant Black. But then that's a title. What about this universe? Like, what's it going to be? Like, what sort of like vibe is it going to have? And I think that this was a chance to put something out into the world that was like our calling card of like, this is what we're doing. This is our mission statement. It's going to be huge. So as much as like we wanted to have very personal moments, and the story is very much about how these 3 characters sort of influence each other and change each other, but it's also just us swinging for the fences in many ways. I think some of them we can't even talk about yet because there'll be surprises. But getting the name Supermassive is like, yeah, right. That's it. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to show what you can do with a superhero universe without corporate sort of like oversight and restrictions and, editorial micromanagement. This is what it means to go big in the year of 2022.
Nice.
Very nice. So Matt, I know you answered this question because it was all about Inferno Girl Red, but for both you and Ryan, you are bringing a new character into Supermassive, characters that we have not seen before or read about before, other than, of course, the Kickstarter and then the announcement that I will say was great, by the way. The way you guys did all of that, the marketing for it was really, really fun. Got people super excited. All of the covers, like I have most of them saved on my phone. I'm just like, yeah, this is awesome. So what can you guys tell us about these characters? So Ryan, you want to go first?
Yeah, you saw my face and I was like, he doesn't know what he's gonna say, does he? So what's the best way to answer this? It was fun because I was writing the book. I was writing my book at the same time we were writing Supermassive. So it was interesting to be able to sort of bounce off because, okay, this is what I said. So one of the things interesting about this is that the character that is Rogue Sun in Supermassive, his name is Marcus Bell, is not the character that is Rogue Sun in Rogue Sun #1. They are two different people. Yeah. And so, because Rogue Sun is this book is about this sort of rebellious teenager who discovers after his father passes away that his dad, his estranged father, was a superhero and has left him his powers. And now, in order to sort of become a superhero, he has to sort of learn about the guy who he hates most in the world. And it's sort of about following in the legacy of people that you don't like and how does that change you and all that stuff. Well, when we did that, as we were working on Supermassive, I realized I was writing the story of actually getting the audience to meet who Marcus Bell is. So you'll get to learn who he is and then come into Dylan's story and sort of learn both. So that was it ended up being a very organic thing that I don't think we ever really intended when we first started figuring out exactly what Supermassive was. So it was great for me as a storyteller because I was actually getting to write both characters at the same time and sort of learning and riffing off of them. I think what I like so much about, and I don't know if this answers the question, but this is sort of where my head went, is what I like about what we got to do is there's so many comic books, there's so many, and it's just so hard to get anything like through the noise. And I just thought, wow, there's something really great about us being able to introduce our characters in sort of this big moment, in this sort of big way, and using, in what way, drafting off of all the success that Kyle has created with Radiant Black in a way that we can all say, we're all working together and building off of that. And that in the same way, it's weird how the book sort of emulates the same way that our careers have all gone and how we all work together. So I don't know, that's a little spiraling answer, but for me, it's very exciting because I've been working with Kyle since the very beginning. My first book was Batman Gets to Gotham with Kyle. And yeah. So that was my first comic. The first comic I ever wrote was that. And so it's been so fun to be able to just keep riffing with him and working with him. And now to be able to do it free of any sort of, and be able to do all the things we always wanted to do and try without anybody there's no parents in the room to tell us we can't do it. So that's the fun I think of just doing this event.
Very nice.
Yeah. My job is to be the parent in the room to tell them that they can't do things, but they don't listen to me. So it doesn't really work out for me.
So Cliff Notes of Inferno Girl Red. Inferno Girl Red is Cassia Costa, a teenage girl who has had a bit of a hard life, but she gets a fresh start and a really exciting opportunity when she gets to move to a very cool place called Apex City. And she's really excited for this fresh start right up until all of Apex City gets ripped out of existence and literally thrown into darkness. But she's given a chance to do something about this when the power of Inferno Girl Red flies into her life. And she's got to find a way to use this sort of in some ways, belief-powered magic in a time when it's very hard to believe in things and have hope. So Inferno Girl Red Book 1, which we kickstarted, coming out later this year, is the origin for Cassia and setting that up. In Supermassive, we actually are getting a glimpse into the future of Cassia as a bit more of an established superhero. So I think it's going to be a fun chance to sort of like look ahead at what's to come in a way that doesn't spoil or ruin any of the events of the book. But I think in some ways, coming into Supermassive, Cassia thinks that she's there. She thinks that she's grown and become the superhero that she needs to be. But in meeting a true veteran superhero in Rogue Sun and someone dealing with a whole other set of things in Marshall, I think a lot of what she thinks about herself is recalibrated. And I think that, Ryan kind of touched on this, but that's kind of been the joy of this process, is that all of these characters are in very specific places, but they all influence each other. Like, these people have really meaningful impacts on each other in their journeys. And having the chance to have this big, bombastic, super fun introduction to these characters, but also have it be a genuine, like, human connection, for better and worse, between these three people, has been a really exciting and I think really different way of meeting characters for the first time.
It's gonna be great just seeing it all just kind of play out at that point. For all of you, besides being friends, working together, all of you share a love of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And so, Kyle, you had talked about how this is like Power Rangers, but for adults, you put that kind of in quotes. What have you taken for your love for your love of Power Rangers and the series of characters, writing it, building that universe to your characters, Radiant Black, Inferno Girl, and Rogue Sun to life?
Well, I mean, at a surface level, there's an aesthetic influence for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I would go deeper though and say that I started kind of getting into more of the original material that Rangers is inspired by and actually adapting, which is Super Sentai seasons. And really, actually, what I've really quite enjoyed over the last year, Matt and I have both been watching Kamen Rider Build. And that has been so much fun and such a great way to hook me for Kamen Rider for life, like, to be honest. So plus Ultraman, Matt and I do at Marvel. So the kind of helmeted hero influence of that subgenre of tokusatsu, would the transforming hero, like the helmeted transforming hero, be a subgenre? Is that a fair?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of like subgenres and subgenres, but yeah, that's part of it. I think there's a difference between like Super Sentai and Kamen Rider versus like, Ultraman.
Yeah, but anyway, so the thing though is, like, of course, like, yes, that is an aesthetic influence on what we do and how we build our characters and our heroes visually. But at the same time, a lot of these generational issues that we're talking about in the book are ones that are affecting, I was saying in an earlier interview, like my generation, which is the generation that was 8 years old when Mighty Morphin Power Rangers hit and was the biggest thing on the face of the planet. Like, for a lot of people, that was like their first superhero set, and certainly the first live action superhero stuff. And so the fact that we're kind of influenced by that stuff and Power Rangers specifically, and then my time doing the book, a lot of that I was finding some of the things that we're now doing with Radiant Black and commenting on and exploring. Some of those were beginning when I was then doing my version of Power Rangers, which was, how do I now at 30 years old in 2017 or 2015 when I started, like, how do I build this for now? So there were little things like that we never got to do in the book. Like, I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but I had this whole like subplot about Zach basically going out and kind of doing more in the community. It was more of like being like a Power Ranger, like there was like a vigilante kind of component to it, not in a dark way, but it was definitely more of like, okay, what does this look like as a subplot doing more traditional superhero stuff? But like, can the problems be ones that are more reflective of like the world? And we couldn't actually get it off the ground because the movie, I guess, was going to do something at one point. It got cut out ultimately of him like going out and using his powers, like using the morpher to do stuff and affect the world a little bit more. And so that's the thing. I think the biggest thing is like Power Rangers was a really good training ground for me anyway, in taking that show and the concepts there and going, okay, when you don't have pre-existing footage and like Zord footage that loops essentially, like when you don't have that stuff, you actually have to figure out, how does this function? How does this work? And how much do I actually have to dive in, figure out and explain versus how much is an audience going to accept based on where we are as a society and our relationship to superheroes, superpowers, and things like superhero media. And so that was kind of like the beginning stages that I've now kind of, I feel like, taken that step into like, okay, I know what Radiant Black is, and that's definitely a direct result of Power Rangers.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of what I was just touching on the difference between Japanese tokusatsu and Western superheroes, and that sort of like status quo versus like really trying to make progress and make a meaningful difference. I think there are also like very specific examples. The thing that Michael and I talked a little bit about was in Super Sentai, which is the like thing that Power Rangers is directly adapted from. Each Super Sentai series is a year long and only lasts a year, and it's a completely different set of people with different circumstances every year. But between each of those year-long seasons, they always have one big movie event where the team from last year meets the upcoming team. And it's like very exciting because it's self-contained, it's one-off, it sort of bookends what's come before and gives you this exciting preview of what's to come. And it was just such like a beautiful model of what we're trying to achieve, of like, this is going to give you like a sense of like payoff and reward if you've been reading Radiant Black, but also you're going to get to see what's coming down the road from all elements of this expansive universe that we're building. And you're going to get to see all of that coming in and interacting with that thing, which perhaps you already know in Radiant Black if you've been reading, or you maybe get to meet him for the first time as well. So it's kind of the feeling that we're chasing.
Okay.
Gotcha.
All good, Ryan. All good.
Ryan's dog is barking. That's why he has not answered it. We're good.
It's all good. So Matt, what
He's
you're
dodging
saying
the
is
question.
we should expect a crossover every year, and that's totally a joke, but that would be kind of cool.
I mean, something that I've said once before is that now that Winnie the Pooh is in the public domain, I feel like Radiant Black meets Winnie the Pooh is definitely Supermassive 2023.
Oh, yes.
So
It's definitely subject matter that we have to take a strong look at and really take into consideration.
I think all I would say is it's a lot of work to put something like this together. It is also a lot of fun. I don't want people to assume that there will be one of these every year, because we may not do that. I certainly think that we would like to do it again at some point.
Yeah. That being said, whenever you're writing something on deadline, you always come up with ideas for what you want to do next, so you don't have to do the thing you're doing. So not to say we've come up with ideas, but I definitely was like, you know,
We have a lot of things that we don't want to do.
We have a lot of things we don't want to do.
I think too, the beauty of, I try and talk broadly here, the beauty of the massive verse, this universe that we're building, is that it's not about three people. You know, like there's obviously a lot going on in Radiant Blackland, for example. There's a lot of different like aspects of that are different stories happening simultaneously. So Supermassive doesn't necessarily have to be these three people like every time. You know, maybe if there is another one, maybe next time Inferno Girl Red isn't there, but you know, maybe somebody or something else is. We want to try and keep it, you know, fluid and exciting, and like you can never expect what's going to come.
It is really exciting. You know,
why is it exciting to you, Clayton? I'm genuinely asking. Like, this is, I love this.
Tables turned.
Well, no, I was there when, Kyle, you did a huge thread, which was actually printed in the back of issue 1 of Radiant Black, about exactly what you were, you know, the whole reason behind Radiant Black and what you were really striving towards. And I was like, That is awesome. You know, for all three of you guys, you have all worked on Power Rangers, and we will touch up on that. Well, we kind of just did, but the point of that being, and what you have already stated, is that you kind of had barriers. And even Ryan and Kyle, y'all have both talked about it in the boom room over at Ranger Danger, the fact that like, hey, there's some things we couldn't do because of this, or do, you know, just some of those stuff. Here, you get to break those boundaries, and you get to do whatever you guys love and whatever you guys, you know, think of. You know, there's nobody telling you, oh, I don't think that's going to work, you know, other than yourselves. And then, you know, you can scratch it and nobody is the wiser. You know, I think that is very, very exciting for you guys to be able to do whatever the hell you guys want to do.
Yeah. I mean, something that we've all talked about is like, yeah, we get to do that, but I think we all feel responsibility to do that. Working at Image and having that profound freedom, if you're not using that to try and push the medium forward or the genre that you're working in forward, if you're not making every aspect of it as good as it possibly can be, then you're letting people down, because you're not taking advantage of what you have, that like great fortune that you have. And I think that that's true on this like massive, like, let's bring these characters together, do something like big like this. I think it's true down to the level of like, I don't want my comics printed on shitty paper. You know, I don't think that the design work should be an afterthought. Like every single piece of it, because it's in our control, should be immaculate to the best of our ability, and we should be bringing in the best partners we can imagine for these things.
Well, and what
There must also come great responsibility, is what Matt is saying.
Yeah, that's much more pithy. I like that. Who said that?
Well, and what's especially cool for me is that, like, I feel like we've been taking big swings in Radiant Black, and you know, Ryan and I just did a convention, and in that spirit, you know, like Ryan actually, there was a plot point that I was like not quite sure on yet, and I told Ryan it, and he was like, "Yeah, you have to do that. No, you have to do that. That's what your book is. Like that's the type of book you are. That's what you have to do." And I guess you know what, I can allude to it. It's something in
Michael got really, he's like, wait, what?
Well, honestly, I don't know what I don't know what it is, so I'm terrified. But I'm going to find out now with all of you.
It's the end of Red.
Oh, okay. Yep. Cool.
Yeah, we're going to do that.
Yeah.
You heard it.
Thanks for confirming that, Ryan. I didn't know that was up in the air.
You're welcome.
So, Kyle, we kind of, I think both you and Matt have both kind of alluded to it, but just to make it clear for our listeners, do they have to finish all 11 issues of Radiant Black before reading Supermassive, or that random day that they're at the comic book shop, can they just pick it up, jump right into it, and everything more or less be okay?
They'll figure it out. They'll have a good time. I don't know that it'll be as I don't know that it'll be as rewarding without the context. That said, I bought Marvel versus DC, having like never read a DC comic book, and like that's how I found Nightwing, because I was like, who is this guy that looks awesome with a dope ponytail? And what do you mean used to be Robin? What the what? Like they did that? That's a thing? He's way cooler looking, and now he's like over my shoulder. So yes, I take that stuff pretty seriously as well. Like we're all about the narrative experience, and I know we keep saying this, but like playing to the strengths of the medium that we're working in. And so if we're going to do a one-shot crossover, like we want it to both stand on its own and be incredibly accessible, but also be something that feels like a continuation and warrants the name Supermassive, as well as the publishing slot, which is after Radiant Black and kicking off Rogue Sun and Inferno Girl Red. So,
right.
So yes, you don't have to know anything, but you're going to want to. You're going to want to, hopefully.
One thing we want to make sure exactly is, you know, this team is all you right here, but for those that aren't, those that are part of the team that aren't here, your artist Francesco Mana, the colorist Igor Monti, and letter Rebecca Carey round out, you know, obviously there are probably a few more, but what are they bringing to this title, this project? Yeah.
Let me handle this, because I love them all so much, and I feel like I can answer this.
Yeah, go for it.
Francesco, and we've also added Simone Ragazzoni to the art team to help out on a section. I think if people have seen Matt and Kyle's Ultraman, Francesco is the artist on that. I think his grasp of like this genre of action and fights and scale is, he's one of the best in the business at it, but he's also great at like, you know, people talking to each other and acting. And I think that plays out here. Simone might not be as well known. I think he's on his way up. He's done a bunch of Power Rangers work. I
love
Simone.
He's done great job.
Yeah, he's filling in on like a sort of middle section for us because deadlines are complicated. And his pencils have come in. He's knocked that section out of the park. I'm really happy. I think people will be delighted. Igor is, I think, the best colorist that people don't know the name of yet. Like, I think he's been on sort of India books so far. I think once someone gets a look at his colors on this book, we're going to use him going forward. He's working on Inferno Girl Red. We're going to have him on some Radiant Black. I think someone's going to try and steal him from us very quickly because
Not happening.
Absolutely
not
not happening.
Not allowed.
I'll keep lovely to work with, but also just like modern and exciting colors that also work with the story. They're storytelling colors. He's great. He's doing something on a specific little chunk of this that is like nothing I've ever seen in comics. He's going all out.
Yeah, I think there's color work specifically in this that will make you gasp, I think.
Yeah. And Becca Carey, I feel similarly about. I think Becca is one of the best letterers in the business. The work she does on the timeline she does it on is unparalleled. So much. There's a possibility for lettering to be like standard and competent and invisible. That's just like they do the thing, you don't really pay attention to it, and sometimes that's what you want. And Becca can do that, and it's great. And also when we say to Becca, like, hey, could he get like a text message alert here? Or what does this sound like? Or he's drunk, what does that balloon look like? Becca lines up the shot, she takes the swing, she knocks it out of the park every time. And this is a complicated book. There's 3 people who are main characters talking. There's bad guys. There's, situations happening. There's sound effects. There's lots of stuff going on. She's going to do phenomenal work. I can't wait for people to see it.
Awesome. Now we do have... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to specifically, I think the connecting thread between those two is that they both feel like they're doing what their respective jobs in the medium should be in the future. I feel like they're both so ahead of the game. And like, I think that the key is that neither of them feel like hired guns. Like, every part of the books that we put together, like from the design to everything else, tries to feel of a piece. And I think they often get it in ways other people don't. Like Becca's letters in Inferno Girl Red aren't the same as they are elsewhere. And they feel like they do in Inferno Girl Red because of the vibe of that book. It's just the way she dials stuff in is amazing. And yeah, feel the same way about Igor.
Yeah, it is worth noting that Becca is our letterer on Radiant Black. She's also lettering both Rogue Sun and Inferno Girl Red. So when I sent her the email about Supermassive, I said, listen, if you don't have time, we understand and we will find someone. But it is important to me that you know that you are our first and only choice at this point. Is like, it would not make sense for anyone else to do this who isn't you.
Also, she has all the templates, so there's that too.
Well,
it does help that she has all the templates.
But also, I love Becca. I'm very, that was, Becca was, I'm going to take credit for bringing Becca to the team.
Yeah, you should.
Because she was a recommendation from Clayton Cowles. And I'd seen a little bit, and she was looking to get going on her own more as a letterer. And it was like I was like, yep, it's a straight offer. Like, it's yours. Like, let's make this work. And I had a feeling just from her design sensibility on certain things. I was like, ooh, we can do some funky stuff here. And like, that's kind of what, even early on, I knew that's what I want to do here. Like, this book, it's so funny. Like, for all of the aesthetic overtones, Radiant Black is as much like, what did I comp it to the other night, Ryan? It's as much like American Splendor. It's like a Harvey Pekar comic, right? As much as it is like a giant, robot, black hole, cosmic, trippy, action fest. So she does both incredibly well.
Yeah, I loved her letters in issue 10. It got wacky. It got really, really fun. And as far as the artist, like, I will say, I think all of you have a super good eye for your create your own stuff, even the stuff that you were working on with Power Rangers and stuff. I will say, I think I will follow Dan Mora until the day he quits comics.
Oh my goodness gracious.
I have every single book that he has. I have been emailing him trying to get an art book of his. Just timing and stuff has not worked out all that well. But one last question for you guys. So what do the current readers of Radiant Black, what do you want the current readers of Radiant Black to leave with from Supermassive, and what do you want those who are seeing these characters for the first time to take away?
Well, with regards to what I want them to leave with, so much of what we've been talking about with this one shot is about it being both a celebration of where superheroes have come from and what has come before, and our influences, and those influences very much include original Image Comics. As it was a game changer when Youngblood launched, and then Savage Dragon and Spawn, and I always get the order wrong, but so we wanted to honor that, but more importantly, we wanted to make kind of a statement towards the future for what we want to do and what we think superheroes can be, and some of the big kind of bold choices that we can make. And so what I comp it to a lot is that season 2 premiere of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, when Lord Zed shows up. When I was a kid, and it was like in primetime TV, it was like, what is this? And a big game changer. Like, that's the kind of vibe here that I want. I want this for Radiant Black. This is the season 2 premiere kickoff event. And with that comes not only this fun, made for CBS primetime movie when, budgets were good. Okay. Early 90s kind of stuff. Right. But it's also going to be a specific promise of some things and some threats that are also to come. So we kind of try to do both here. And I hope, I hope people give it a shot and enjoy it.
Well, I know
and I think,
in
terms of the other characters coming in, I feel like if you're reading Radiant Black, you'll know that the trajectory of intensity of that story is like straight up. It just like shot up. It was explosive in its storytelling. And I feel like the mission of Supermassive, to make clear, is that it's not that it sort of hit that point and then we're going to like level out. That trajectory is actually only going to sort of increase. This world is going to get so much radically bigger and wilder in its storytelling, which is only like a much bigger statement given where Radiant Black has been already. So I want people to come away feeling like, a bomb has gone off in the world of superhero comics, and they're going to have to like take a breather to figure out what it's going to mean when all of the pieces sort of like fall to the ground.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's like we cannot wait for it. Anyone who has told different people I know is, what's the one comic of the year you would recommend? I said it's Radiant Black. It is absolutely Radiant Black, and everything that you guys are building towards. Besides us big fans, this is going to be something special, and we're really excited for you all to have this out there for us. So just thank you all, Kyle, Matt, Ryan, Michael, for coming on the show. It releases right now, mid-February-ish. So we'll go with that. And, before we say goodbye, before we stop the recording, tell people how they can follow you, and so that if they're not following you, how they can follow you.
Probably just social media. Well, no, actually, I should clarify that. My favorite ways is through our newsletter, the Black Market News. So if you go to blackmarket.la, you can sign up for the newsletter there. It's also where we're doing exclusive merch drops, including some limited covers. And maybe that might be a thing that would be applicable for people to pay attention to, or interested in that sort of thing with something like, I don't know, a Supermassive and maybe even a Rogue Sun. And then the other place would be on Twitter, the @Radiant Black BLK account, at Kyle D. Higgins. And then there are some other accounts for Black Market Narrative, Radiant Red, and I think the pink one showed up too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not nearly as fancy. I'm just on Twitter with the very pretentious name of @Ryan Parrott, 2 R's, 2 T's. So see you there.
I second what Kyle said about the Black Market Narrative newsletter. There's always going to be explosive stuff coming out through that from all of our realms. So definitely go there, check out that Twitter account as well as sign up for the newsletter. Me specifically, I am @Matthew Groom on Twitter, 1 T in Matthew, and you can follow Inferno Girl Red at Inferno Girl Red on Twitter.
I'm at M_Busuttil, BUSUTTIL on Twitter. It is mostly bad jokes and coping with people not turning things in on time, rather than work talk.
None of these guys right here, right?
No,
All
of
of
course
these.
not. None of these guys. But if you want that, that is where that is.
Well, thank you all so much. This was an opportunity that Clay and I only dreamed about when we started talking about just everything y'all have been doing. It's like, it would be great if we get any one of these guys, and having you all right here is a dream come true. So thank you all, and we look forward to it.
Oh, thanks so much.
guys.
Have a good one.